Thanks for listening to Spotify. No, really. You could have listened to the radio. You could have spun some vinyl. You could have played a cassette tape. You could have listened to an 8-track tape. If you knew what an 8-track tape looked like. But you listened to Spotify. Thanks for that. And you still have hundreds more playlists to enjoy.
Can I see you again when I leave this place? When I'll be wherever you see you again, see you again. Standing straight, hope it ain't too late to desire, running in circles without no end, hoping to see you again. After the end, can I hold you again? Can't wait much longer. See you again, see you again. Can
about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.
I turned off the lights, I got off the wires. When I close my eyes, disconnected and tired. I see you, I see you, yeah. And I know you keep asking me, flames and fire. I know you are done with me. It's just fired. It's just fired.
I'm going to call the board meeting to order. We have a quorum present. We do need a motion to approve the agenda. Oops, use your microphone.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Director Fletcher, I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda has been approved. Well, welcome everybody to our school board, our special school board meeting tonight. For those of you that are visitors, I will remind you that the school board is a meeting that's held in the public, but it's not a public meeting. And so if you wish to speak to an agenda item, when that item comes before the board, there is a form, a pinkish form that Jake has, or they're out, I'm sorry, they were out by the door when you walked in, that must be filled out, turned into Jake, and when it's your turn and your name is called, you state your name, and address, and you speak specifically to only that agenda item. And there will be a 3-minute time limit per person. So with that, we will move on to the Return to Learn plan. And Jake, did anybody fill anything out? Okay. Okay.
Well, thank you, and appreciate everybody that's come out tonight, administrative team, board members, and members of our community. So tonight, we are going to talk about our Return to Learn plan and consideration for approval. And so there have been a few revisions to the plan since the board first discussed this draft version. And that was on July 13th. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to go over here so I can see the screen, make sure the crowd is seeing what I want them to see. One thing I would point out, and if you go right down to the bottom of the first page, one thing for everybody to be fully aware of, keep going down, right there. So this was last updated on July 19th, and the revisions you're going to see tonight are either going to be highlighted in yellow or in green. And that note right there I want everybody to take a look at is recommendations within this plan are fluid and subject to change. One item that's really important to know about that we don't have data around that is going to come down from the state, supposed to receive it by the first week in August, is guidance around quarantining and school closures based on the governor's proclamation that came out July 17th. We're supposed to receive that information. The governor's proclamation took away the ability of local school districts to close because of COVID-19, something that previously districts were supposed to work with local county health systems to make those determinations. Now we have to work with the Iowa Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. And so we're waiting on that guidance, metrics, matrix, whatever it might be, that will tell us how we'll respond to COVID-19 issues in our district. And so I know a lot of people want that information. We don't have it yet. And so if we scroll down to that first highlighted green section, I'll talk about our first change. And so as we're going through this, we have implementation teams at the building level. We have the executive cabinet, which is Kate Baldwin, Executive Director of Administrative Services. Don Shiro is Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. Myself, D.T. McGee, Superintendent. Eric Neeson, Director of Student Services. Tim Geyer, Director of Technology, and Allison Cornwell, Director of Human Resources. And then our building principals, along with our executive cabinet, are really the main decision-making body around this, taking feedback from different sources. So our building principals, I'll go in order from Oviatt on up. Oviatt Elementary, Amy Gage. Orchard Hills, Sheila Taylor. Jill Anderson at Lakewood. Beth Ward at the middle school. Dr. Jody Radigan at Eastview 8-9, and Chris Basinger at the high school. And so we've been taking feedback. We also have a parent advisory committee who is listed in the Return to Learn plan that's providing feedback. We've had 2 meetings with them, and we met last night after the town hall meeting to receive additional feedback. One of the items we received feedback from different stakeholders, parents, and from staff members for sure, is to give more specificity around what type of hybrid plan we would have in place if we have to social distance in buildings. And so the recommendation you see here, and it's on page 2, in the event that Governor Reynolds, the Iowa Department of Public Health, DE, and/or Warren County Health Services provide a mandate to reduce group size or increase social distancing, and we're defining social distancing a requirement is at 6-foot level. Norwalk Community School District will reduce the number of students in each classroom. A reduction in class size will require students to attend fewer days per week. For in-person instruction, the district will employ an alternating day hybrid model when one group of students attend school on purple cohort days and one group of students attend school on gold cohort days. District staff members will make every effort to assign students in the same household to the same cohort. Students with special needs, IEPs, 504 plans, ELL, and at-risk students may continue to attend daily to meet some of their needs. This recommendation was impacted by the governor's proclamation. we have to have our main plan to be in-person learning. So that's come down from Senate File 2310 and the governor's proclamation. The governor clarified that and said at least 50% of your instruction has to be in person. You could do a 50% hybrid model, in person, 50% remote, let's say, or some variation of that, but you have to have at least 50% in person. Our initial hybrid plan had us going in a cohort of Monday and Tuesday, purple cohort, take Wednesdays off, and then have a gold cohort on Thursday and Friday. And then we'd go into the next week, same thing, purple on Monday and Tuesday, gold on Thursday and Friday. Well, within that 50% threshold has to be met over a 2-week period. That hybrid model did not meet that 50% threshold. So we visited with executive cabinet, and we talked to principals, and then we took a look at the data from some parent feedback on the return to learn plan, and the number one hybrid model that was mentioned was an A/B day, and conversations about some of the complexity of different models. That's what we're currently recommending. Now, again, I go back to the start of this presentation, which is this is fluid, and that recommendation may change based on new information that we received, just like we received on July 17th. So I'm going to stop there and see if the board members have any questions about this hybrid model. This is not what we're recommending to start the year. We're still recommending in-person with the online option as our for approval tonight. Any questions from the board?
Would these school days be extended for a number of hours if we're only sending students 4 days a week, essentially either online or in person?
So the recommendation right now is to run regular schedules and regular calendars. So we would not plan on extending the school days. That would be the recommendation. Okay. Any other questions about the hybrid model? Go ahead. Yes.
Would parents get to pick which cohort they're in, or how is that decided?
So my initial response is no, that we would be choosing the cohort they're in because of the complexity of rolling it out and which one do you want to be in. And our priority would be around households. As one thing we've received in feedback from staff and from parents, if you go with some type of alternating plan, if students in the same household can attend, then we'd go with that. Now, having said that, we would listen to requests that would come in from parents, maybe after the fact of, if we had to make some movement and we had some volunteers, we would certainly entertain feedback from parents. But I would say up front, we most likely would not ask for requests from parents to choose the days. Other questions about the hybrid model?
Okay, just to clarify, the hybrid at AB wasn't the 2 days and the 2 days. It would have to be more of an every other day rotation throughout the 2 weeks so that they would attend 5 days within those 2-week periods.
That is correct. And then through that alternating time frame, each cohort should have a Wednesday. So let's say if we started August 24th and purple was on Monday, it would go purple Monday, gold Tuesday, purple Wednesday, gold Thursday, purple Friday. Go to the next week, gold on Monday, purple on Tuesday, gold on Wednesday, purple on Thursday, gold on Friday. And so each cohort would attend, a day of the week, Monday through Friday. It would just be in different 2-week periods.
And that hasn't been finalized, but that's the plan that you're looking at this time.
Yeah, if we have to social distance, that's the tentative, recommendation right now. Knowing what we know now, again, I go back to this is based on the information we have in front of us and the requirements that are coming down from the state level.
So DT, if we go to that, then we will not have, obviously, professional development on Wednesdays, or would you still have that? Would that be an early out?
The plan is still to have Wednesday early outs.
Okay.
There's some value in that for planning for our teachers, especially related to the challenges of providing both in-person and online teaching for some of our staff members. And so Dawn Sharo talked to that.
Yes, Wednesday would stay the same. And the reason behind that is because with our students coming back after this gap, we don't know where their learning really is. And the teachers, before they left in June, came up with a plan of looking at which standards they needed to focus on. And then in the next grade level, they will embed those in and scaffold those in that next grade level or content area, however that works. So that early out Wednesday is going to be really important for them to have that PLC time to be able to do that work, continually look at student data, identify where those needs are so we can move our students where they need to be. So those Wednesdays are really valuable. So Wednesday would stay the same. It's just that each group would rotate on those Wednesdays.
So, and I'll go back to, this is part of the challenge to this planning process, is this information hit us on July 17th. We had to submit a plan, an application to the state for return to learn by July 1st. So some of the work we did during June through July 17th was based on a different set of facts and what we understood to be true. Some of that changed on July 17th, so we've had to adjust the plan based on that.
So one more thing, that hybrid plan we would end up moving to that if by chance the governor came with another proclamation like in the past that said, you need to reduce group sizes down to 250, or you need to reduce group sizes down to 50. Then we would have to look to see if that hybrid plan would meet that proclamation in way of those group sizes then.
All right, if you'd scroll down to page 3. Page 3 was the next language update. Not a major, just a structural update. We added sections 8 and 9, which is the building implementation plans, which will be linked in to this return to learn plan starting on Friday. We'll also send that information out to parents. The implementation plans contain a lot of details that are not in this plan that some parents have been asking for, lunch, transition maybe between periods. And so consult the building level plans. If you have questions, those questions should really be directed to building level administrators, principals, who will, they may not answer your question, but they'll direct the right person to get questions asked and answered. And then additional references and resources, just added that as a quick link in the document down to the bottom of the page. All right, so if we go down, and I'll get to my next change. I apologize, my computer's just a little bit slow. So no changes under section 1, communication, and no changes under section 2, infrastructure, I believe, except for we did some clarification under transportation regarding face coverings. So on the bottom of, if we scroll down to page 10, and it is section 2.5.4, transportation. Right there. So students will be required to wear face coverings unless they have an approved religious or medical waiver. And so we just provided some clarifying language. State law requires us to provide some exemptions for face coverings, specifically related to religion and medical needs. So those waivers can be granted. We will get a process out to parents prior to the start of the school year, should the board approve this plan, that identifies how to request and receive one of those waivers. And so we just needed to provide that clarifying language in there.
Superintendent McGee?
Yep.
How will compliance to this requirement work? This will be a question for in the classroom as well, but in the transportation setting, when you're having one driver, focusing on that task, not how many people have masks on, or if they brought masks, or if they choose to follow this requirement while safely transporting kids to our facilities.
Yep. So I think the scenario that we're most concerned about is, one, we'll have masks, disposable masks on each bus. And so if someone arrives without a mask, here's your mask. Please remember to bring your mask tomorrow. And so we'll talk a little more about overall just face mask and face covering requirements in an upcoming section. But the most challenging situation that I anticipate would be a student that shows up and refuses to put on a mask that doesn't have a waiver. And so we'll work with Carlos Guerra, our transportation director, and figure out a method for that. It might be that bus waits with that child at that stop, and then when we send a vehicle where social distancing can happen, pick them up and transport them separately, because we certainly aren't going to leave a kindergarten or first or second, third grade, fourth, 10th grade, 11th grade student on the side of the road by themselves. So we have some mechanisms we can do that. And then we would trip into what are those expectations, right? Riding the bus, attending school is a privilege in a lot of ways. And so we would go through that normal process of educating first, and then potentially getting into a discipline situation where it could be, escalate to a point where a child can't ride the bus if they can't follow the rules. And the same would be for attendance at school. Similar to other discipline, we're not going to develop special policies for this because we believe our student discipline policies and behavior expectations address this new requirement. Other questions on that section? Okay, if we scroll down to page 15, and it'll be section 3.4. So from the original draft of the Return to Learn plan, the original draft had a face covering requirement. First, it has not changed for staff, visitors, and volunteers. They'll still be required to wear a face covering. The student face covering requirement has been modified based on feedback and some additional information and guidance from specifically Warren County Health Services. And so the requirement went from where we were strongly recommending face coverings for students to now face coverings, and I'll just read it off. Face coverings, nose and mouth, are required for students if social distancing can't be maintained, and required for staff and visitors. Waivers of these requirements may be granted for religious and medical reasons as required by law. And then the second bullet point, which did not change, is guidance and recommendations on face coverings can be found at the CDC cloth face coverings webpage. We will get some additional information. Some questions we're getting about what are acceptable types of face coverings, so we'll get additional information out if the board approves this recommendation. And then Warren County Health Services, this is a new section. Warren County Health Services has informed this recommendation using guidance from the American Academy of Pediatricians. So we're working with Warren County Health Services to make this recommendation. And depending on which source you look at, there are some differences in guidance. Iowa Department of Public Health, American Academy of Pediatricians, CDC, and that all funnels through Warren County Health Services and ultimately through our district decision-making process. And so that is the tweak. The recommendation for, again, was to have student face coverings highly recommended. So we've made a modification to that. In talking to the staff specifically, our administrative team, this recommendation really flows from the fact that it does give some flexibility within buildings to give students face mask breaks, even in classrooms if social distancing can be maintained, outside and in some other areas. Like if you're a reading teacher and you're working one-on-one with a student in a classroom, the student could take their face covering off, and as long as the teacher and the student are maintaining that 6-foot distance. And so there are some advantages to this versus just saying face coverings are required, period, all the time. So questions about this tweak in the plan, change in the plan?
You hit one of the clarifying questions, and for example, between Don and I, there's 6 feet. If it's just us two, I could take my mask off. But because David's sitting so close to me, I can't. Is that the rule? Is that what we talk about, maintaining 6 foot of distance?
Well, you two would be staff members, so you'd have to wear masks no matter, if you're in the same room. So for staff members, I want to clarify. One thing we will say is if a staff member is in their office by themselves or a classroom by themselves, a work area by themselves, they wouldn't have to wear a mask. But the minute someone walks into that area, they need to put a mask on. That's what we're doing at the district office right now. I can have my mask off in my office as long as there's nobody else in there. But when someone walks into my workspace, then we both are masked up. And of course, if I'm in a common area, hallway, break room, I have to have a mask. Students, if you two were students, yes, if you had 6 feet of distance in between the two of you, the teacher could say, you two could take your masks off right now, if you want to. Don't have to, but you could.
And since we are now moved to a more of a required state of this, I know we have attempted to acquire more PPE.
Yes.
Disposable and more permanent. Does that change our order knowing that if a student comes to us without a mask from home,
Yep.
or because these disposable ones can break fairly easily,
Yes.
that we have to maintain a supply basically in every room, every bus, every spot to make that requirement work.
Yes, we will. We've got right now, we've already received them 600 face shields. And tonight you saw one example that Carlos Square was wearing a face shield that's got an eyeglass format to it. And then we bought 500 of those, and then 100 that are a pad and then elastic wrap that goes around. And then they have anti-fog material. So we have 600 of those. So the priority is we're going to give all of our staff members a face shield. And then we'll have some left over to potentially use with students or, extras. From a face covering, face mask standpoint, I believe right now in stock we have at least 2,000 disposable masks. So we use those for, again, buses, and all of our buildings will have a supply of disposable masks. And then we are ordering at least 2,000 cloth face coverings. And so all of our staff members will get at least one cloth face covering. And then we'll have them available for students as well. We are going to ask that our students bring their own cloth face coverings. We'll give guidance about what are acceptable cloth face coverings. And then staff can do the same thing, but we will provide those. Now, yes, I think over time, we will either have to order more, or we may just do that right at the start of the year. Yep. And we're also, and we would ask help from our community on this issue, is we're looking to get more, build up our stock of N95 masks, specifically for our staff members, and most specifically for our nurses, who will be right there working with some staff and students who may have symptoms of COVID-19. So if you have a source of N95 masks, please email Richard Sleeth, our Director of Buildings and Grounds.
DT, on the mask requirements or face coverings, I've read the guidance, the AAP guidance, and we've all read the guidance from the Department of Health, and I believe what we're doing complies with that guidance, but I do think it's important as parents that probably haven't read necessarily in the detail that we have of some of that guidance, maybe they have, it's available out there, to know that the district's going to do its best to have face masks, face coverings on children, but there are situations where it's just not going to occur. And I know we've got a process for that, but I just think as parents are making that decision, I want to be sure there's not big surprises in the district and with students and parents when some of that happens.
Well, what I will say is that, if you see a picture that comes out of a school building and you see a student without a mask, don't automatically assume that a teacher or a principal or a staff member isn't requiring a student to follow a rule, because they might have a waiver. And we have some example, we may have some special needs students who receive a waiver not to wear a face covering because they just, maybe they don't have a medical or religious reason, but they just, are cognitively or behaviorally at a place where maybe that's not something that it's going to be a bigger problem to try to get them to wear a mask than if we grant them the waiver. So we'll have a waiver process that will include some of those unique situations in our building. And then we will have signage that identifies that face coverings are required except for those situations where we have a waiver.
Yep, that's what I understand. I just think it's important that parents understand that piece of it. And then the other comment that I have in regard to face coverings, as you put that decisioning that Justin was describing on the teachers, and I know we've talked about potentially having some more detail at the building level or the principal level to support some of those decisionings at the teacher level, because certainly one teacher in one classroom may view that differently, and I just want to be sure we're giving the support needed there so that there's not too much pressure on one classroom, so to speak.
Yeah, we will be having those conversations with administrative team, full staff, teachers, about the importance of some consistent implementation of this expectation across the district. Absolutely.
DT.
Yes.
So in some of the guidance from the pediatrics, they were saying that some of the younger kids didn't need the mask as much as the older kids, but that has switched more so lately. I guess I was thinking that there might have been a difference, but now even like the preschool kids, they say it could be not more harmful, but may not be the best benefit. But we're still saying we still want pre-K through 12 at all times unless there's mask breaks to where
Yeah, social distancing, yep, yeah. So it might be in the building, it might be out of the building. It could be with a fairly full room, but you might have an area in the room where a student can go in there and maintain 6 feet of social distancing and take a mask break. And so we have conversations about like, a clip or a lanyard perhaps where the students can have their mask down when they take a break. So that other things that are important in the plan that haven't received as much attention because, people agree with it, like good hand hygiene. We will do that, and we'll be teaching kids. And remember, we're working with teachers here, right? We're working with teachers, and they're going to be on this, right? They're going to help to, okay, you got to wash your hands. This is how you do it. Sing your ABCs, 20 to 30 seconds. And same thing with masks. Like we have great confidence in our teachers that they'll help students understand the importance of this and kind of get through that early stage of this type of requirement. Other questions?
Maybe elaborate on the waiver process, the timelines, and is it completely at the discretion of the parents to submit that waiver to you?
So
To the district?
obviously a medical waiver, we're going to ask for some more specific information. With the religious waiver, that's the parent will fill out the form. And so that will be at the discretion of the parents for those religious reasons. But we will get, again, that information out well before school starting. So we'll be working on that. Again, should the board approve this plan, we'll start that work tomorrow. It's not going to come out tomorrow. I just want to be clear. We got some other things that are coming out tomorrow potentially, but the waiver form for face coverings will not be tomorrow.
DT on the mask too. I know at the last meeting you provided us with the guidance from lawyers as far as liability on the district for requiring the mask, but I'm assuming that because of, at least my understanding of how we have it written, that we're going to be okay, that we're following the guidelines as they're stated, that masks should be required when you can't social distance.
Yeah, and it's something definitely we as school administrators, our staff, and the board should be mindful of. Is if we do have a policy, it's there is a liability whether we implement the highly recommended or this recommendation now. There's some liability both ways, but yes, we need to attend to that, and we're good with this policy.
Will we be providing teachers with a little bit of training to understand the potential distress students can be in from being in face coverings for long periods of time? I know we talked about giving them breaks, but to 5 minutes to 10 minutes to half an hour to an hour could affect a child differently.
So the state has health and safety modules that administrators are required to take and all teachers. So we're waiting on that to come up with a plan for all teachers. We're not too sure of the content, but I would assume there's a lot of social and emotional and behavioral kind of things in that health and safety module that they'll be doing.
One thing I would encourage, for those that are watching, and we'll get some more additional information out, we're going to have some videos that we send out about hand washing and mask wearing. So there's a lot of good resources out there. So we'll deploy those resources. The other thing is, as we approach the school year, similar to what we talk about is get your child in a schedule as you approach the school year. If they've been staying up till, let's say, 10 o'clock at night, and they're a third grader, but then they can get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, start to dial back their schedule to what it's going to look like when they get to school, when you get into later summer. And so what I would encourage some parents to do is start having their children wear face coverings in preparation of going through a day where they may be wearing a face covering for a good portion, if not most of the day. And so it's important so that you don't just go, okay, going to school today, Susie, and here's your face covering, and they've had no preparation for that. And so that would be one great way that parents could help out, is start to have students do some prep work around wearing face coverings. Okay, if we go down to the next page, we're going to go to 3.8. And on our masks and face shields, same language. This was added underneath masks and face shields and replaced the old language. And then we added a note from some of our local health professionals about some of the benefits of face masks and face shields. And so primarily it says this: please note that local medical professionals have informed the district that face masks are helpful in preventing the spread of COVID-19, while face shields are helpful in preventing being infected by COVID-19. And so this is one area that we'll continue to monitor, because if there is a shift, we may have to come back and say, the preferred face covering is a face mask. And so right now, we're just saying face coverings, which would be a shield or a mask. If something changes within those dynamics and a recommendation that comes down stronger, say towards mask or shields, we'll come back to the board and apprise you of that, any switch in that recommendation. Any questions?
I think you met with the advisory group last night after the
Yes.
town hall. Did they have a recommendation regarding masks for shields?
So no recommendations, and again, they're an advisory group, but what I would say is there are questions that were raised about should we require face masks and not face coverings. But in our conversations with, again, we go back to Warren County Health Services, they're still using that face coverings are recommended, and that can be a shield or a mask. Again, this is a fluid situation, and so that is subject to change, and just know that we're going to monitor that situation closely to see if anything changes from a recommendation around face coverings. Okay, at the bottom of that page, we did add in a resource that is a face mask comparison guide that has been put out by the Iowa Association of School Boards. You see a lot of links in this document to a lot of different resources. We haven't linked in every single piece of information that we've taken a look at, but if there is an important document that's really informed, whether it's a building implementation team, potentially, but most importantly, some of our work with the state and the executive cabinet principals, we've tried to link in that documentation. And so this is one of those that's come out recently that is a good resource that we considered. Okay, under standard or section 4, really no changes under section 4 to any language. Section 5, no language updates from when you reviewed that on July 13th. And then under section 6, again, no updates under section 6. Under section 7, which is data considerations, no update under section 7. Now, section 8, which is down on page 23, I believe. 24. So right at the top of page 24, we will link in the building implementation plans to this plan starting tomorrow. So that's why it's highlighted in yellow. And so we have that information. We've tried to put that in a common format. There are some planning documents that the buildings are using that vary a little bit between building, but we've tried to get those building implementation plans following the same format so parents can understand what the recommendations are and go through that and see similar information in a similar format. And I just have to give a shout out to our principals and all of our building implementation teams, because just like from a district standpoint, we're adjusting on the fly to new information. We make an adjustment, then they have to make an adjustment. Face masks would be an example. Hybrid plan would be an example. And so they're making adjustments same as we are. And oftentimes there's more details that they have to account for than we do with this plan. And so really appreciate the work of our principals and all of our leaders at the building level. On the 9th section, additional references and resources. So with that, we've added a couple different resources. So one is the governor's proclamation from July 17th. And so that is impacting us through Senate File 2310 that was passed by the legislature in June. And so we've linked that in, so you can click on that link and go out to the proclamation. And then also Senate File 2310, Guidance for Schools from the 17th, and then proclamation, Frequently Asked Questions from the Department of Ed that was released on July 20th. And so we've added in those resources under the references and resources area. And then down under other references and resources, we've got a Warren County Health Services FAQ document, also CDC interim guidance for administrators of U.S. K-12 schools, CDC symptoms of coronavirus. We will also be issuing more explicit guidance around symptom monitoring to our staff and parents as we approach the school year. And so we're getting some of that finalized with the nurses. Our nurses have been heavily involved, especially with Section 3, the health and safety aspect of this plan. And then we have some additional items down At the bottom, there is some research study regarding face masks and face coverings. And so we've linked that in. And so those are the changes to the plan. In language, we still have the ability for parents to provide feedback. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see in the footer, there is keep going down to the next page. Go down. Keep going. Keep going right there. Okay. So we have some graphics on the first page and the last page to click and provide feedback. Parents can still do that for a period of time. And then also the survey link is in the footer throughout the document. And so any questions from the board regarding language changes? Any other questions?
I don't know that it's on one of the changes. Well, I guess it potentially could have changed a little the hybrid component, DT, but I just was curious. I heard Dawn kind of describe what would trigger a change to a hybrid operating procedure for the school, but how would you see that unfolding from a procedural perspective once that were to happen?
So some concerns we have going into the year are some, every plan has areas you look at are potential weak points for implementation, some things that we can control very well and some things that may be a challenge. And so one is the guidance from the state coming down the first week in August. We don't know what that is yet, and so depending on what that guidance is may impact our hybrid model type plan. Two is just staffing levels and concerns. If we have to have staff members that are out, it might be maybe they were infected with COVID-19 or in close contact, and remember close contact defined as within 6 feet for 15 or more minutes to someone who is symptomatic, specifically been tested positive for COVID-19. So staffing concerns, substitute teachers, and can we just cover the positions we need to cover, might impact a hybrid plan. And then transportation is another area that we're going to monitor very closely because that's a part of our plan too that has some challenges. Bus drivers are hard to come by to begin with, and so we just have to make sure we can run our bus routes that we need to run. And so those are some areas that, depending on what dynamics happen within any of those areas, could impact our hybrid plan.
Right. I agree. And I think, to your point, flexibility as this thing unfolds with both internal factors and external factors. I guess I was knowing that the hybrid plan is not, it's today what we think that would look like. It might look like something different based on what those factors become. I get that. I guess I was as we pass this plan today, it's saying we have a hybrid option to go to if something says we should. Does that come back to the board at that point? Is that a trigger that gets made by?
That's something I think if we needed to go offline with a special board meeting, that's something we're going to bring back. We had a different hybrid option, that we were considering, but then the governor's proclamation came down. We had to change it. Another aspect that will impact this is just as we monitor our staff and the time they need to be effective with in-person education, as well as online education and serving students in both of those arenas, that we'll be monitoring that to see if we need to tweak our plan at all. That's another important piece of this.
Right, but triggering that hybrid, whatever that becomes, comes back to
comes back to the board.
Is how you see that, and that at any time. That could be before school starts or frankly in the school year. That's what I would see. Now, there may be like in short order, if we have to pivot to like fully online, that'll be where the board has a decision to make coming up like at August 10th. If the board wants to maintain that control over that choice, which again might cause us to have a special board meeting in short order, or if you're going to grant me the ability to make that decision. But I'm not going to ask the board to pivot on a hybrid plan without bringing that back for board approval. I just didn't know if passing this plan, that was already built in or not. And then my second tag-on question, which I don't think we know the answer to yet. So parents have August 1st to make their decision to go fully online or to go with the plan as it sits to send their children back. And we know there's some guidance coming down about quarantine, positive tests, things of that nature. We know there's also internal factors. There's future external factors we don't know. As that unfolds, how do you see parents that chose one way at a different later point in time wanting to choose a different direction? Is that going to be case by case, one by one? Do you see that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, it's going to be case by case. And so I am approving all of the online requests. And remember, there's going to be two ways. One is medical reasons, which was in the legislation, everybody's pretty clear on that. So if you have a medically, so I'm just going to say medically fragile person in your home, it could be a dad, it could be a mom, it could be a sister, brother, it could be that individual student. Might be grandma or grandpa that's a guardian that's living with a family or is the actual guardian of the student. With that, we're going to ask for additional documentation that's identified in the legislation. And that way, if they have that, then that's guaranteed. Schools don't have to offer the voluntary online programs. That's part of our plan, recommendation to the board. And that could go away at some point in time. Like the governor could issue a different proclamation to say, schools can't do this anymore. And so we want to clearly identify which model a student is under. Are they voluntary online, required remote learning, or are they under medically required remote learning? And so, and those will all go through me. So if there's a change after the August 1st date, they will come to me on a case-by-case basis. I'll review those. And I'm sure I'll be looping in some other people in those conversations.
For those students that then have to go online because of quarantine exposure, whatever criteria there, how are we communicating that to the buildings and keeping track, not for those that have selected that for the term, but those that are on a 1, 2, 5, 14-day issuance into that to make sure that they don't just get dropped, like, hey, they didn't show up, but yet no one accounted for them online.
One of the things we have to make sure we do is take attendance. So that's mandatory no matter what. And then it's going to be very individualized for students. So if they have to quarantine because they're sick themselves, we should be getting some guidance on a little more about what that looks like, about taking attendance and ensuring students are there. So do we log them in as absent if their family member has COVID and they have to quarantine? Those are questions we're still waiting for some guidance, and I think we'll get more of that information once they actually give us information about what does that look like to quarantine in those different scenarios.
So, and we will have to pivot because we might, depending what the guidance comes down from the state, we might have to pivot on an individual basis where one student has to quarantine, and we'll have to serve them. And it's 14 days. We'll have to figure out the educational program because they're going to, when the 14 days is up, mom and dad are sending them back, or mom or dad or grandma, whoever they're sending them back, and we understand that. We might have to quarantine a classroom for 14 days or some length of time. We might have to quarantine a building or the whole district. And so we just ask our families to be ready and do some contingency planning around what might happen if we have to transition between different learning models, and that can be with individual student, classroom, or a portion of a classroom. We don't know what the guidance is going to be at, building or district. The other thing we're doing is we do have some special attendance, a new attendance code that we've put into our system that's related to COVID-19. So we'll be able to identify that because there are some different provisions that come in for staff and for students around COVID-19.
I think one of the other things we're trying to plan for is that instruction that may be face-to-face. How do we also integrate that remote kind of learning at the exact same time? So if we're in Google Classroom or we're in Canvas, can we have kids do lessons in there now so that if it does have to flip and a classroom has to stay home or a student, they already have that knowledge base of how to use that tool?
That was my question. So the tools are going to be there and they're going to be active August 24th for everyone. And the goal is to use them for only those who are choosing virtual. But we know that if someone's quarantined for a certain amount of days, that if they're not sick themselves, they should be able to continue their work and continue through those classes that they're in and not be losing anything from it.
Right. We're trying to make this more blended when we come back, just so that if that does happen, since it's so unpredictable, we want to make it more of a smooth transition for students if that has to happen.
Yeah, the plan will look different. So if you're on quarantine, your child's on quarantine for 14 days, the plan's going to look a little bit different than if they're in person in school. Likewise, if you choose an online program for your child, there's going to be some differences, and this will be in the form where parents or guardians sign off. That online program is going to look different. It's not going to be the same as an in-person educational program. And so we're going to do our best in those situations, but this is that complexity we're trying to go through to get to some simple answers. And we've started to provide basically some simple answers. Are face coverings required or not? What type of plan are we going with? But we've had to go through a lot of complexity, and we're still going to continue to go through that because, again, plans are fluid, subject to change, sometimes with some advance notice, sometimes with very little, if up to zero advance notice, just depending on circumstances.
DT, and I apologize for this maybe changed under my nose, but I thought when we were discussing hybrid models, we were, for consistency and even for cleaning's sake, having like the purple group go Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then gold's Thursday, Friday, so that especially for the younger children, that routine is built in versus the every other day having could potentially be a completely different schedule. Ultimately, you get to the same point. It was more of, and maybe like I said, I must have missed that at some point through our communication, so I apologize. But I thought for the pattern's sake, we were more of a 2 on, 2 off type of deal versus an every other day.
Yeah, and that's what we were looking at. But given the fact that we have to do this over a 2-week period with 50%, that the information we were operating on prior to July 17th switched. And so then looking at the feedback from, again, parents and administrative team, that was the desire. And then July 17th, Governor's proclamation comes down, and that information impacted that decision making. That was the trigger for that. Otherwise, yes, we were looking at that consistent, they say Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday time frame, and then give some more time for cleaning. But we're going to have to deploy cleaning resources in a different way. So possibly some additional staff, including some additional staff, maybe asking like our classroom teachers to do some additional cleaning of high-touch surfaces to help relieve some of the pressure on our custodians, providing cleaning supplies in each room, and then deploying custodians in a different way, say at night or in the mornings, and then on Wednesday afternoons when we have fewer students and staff in buildings.
And that's kind of where I sat there and said, well, if we're actually bringing exposure in and out every day, different groups, are we really changing the dynamic of, other than not having everybody in the building at once? But it's basically the same concept, just you're doing it over a 2-day span. And that's fine. I hope, to be honest, I hope we're not into that particular situation we're planning here. But that one seemed odd from a...
Well, and I think some of what we're learning is that, it's my understanding in conversations with the health professionals, Warren County Health Services, is the main concern is airborne transmission. And so with that, if you practice good hygiene, hand hygiene, like there was initial guidance that playgrounds, like you should be, like if a student goes and plays on playgrounds, you should sanitize those. Well, that guidance has now changed and basically saying when you maybe come out of a building or go into a building, you should use hand sanitizer. That's more effective than like sanitizing the equipment after use. And so that is evolving, and that's impacting our decision making as well.
I know the athletic and activity unions will make their own decisions on activities, but if you go to a hybrid model, what is the expectations for kids that are off campus for that given day? And this doesn't, like I said, it could be any type of activity or any school-related event and participation.
Yeah, and we're not sure about that yet. July 27th, we're supposed to get more information about fall activities, specifically fall sports. So some of the main supervisory organizations or governing bodies we work with, of course, with the Iowa High School Athletic Association, Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, Iowa High School Music Association, and Iowa High School Debate Association. And there are some other entities we work with, like Iowa Jazz Championships and things like that. And so we're waiting for July 27th to see what more information is. That is something that I know, for me, I'm attending regular meetings with area superintendents at least once a week. Warren County superintendents have started to meet at least once a week. And then I've got some other groups that I work with that are some smaller group of superintendents. That is one question that's come up in that group is if you go to a hybrid model, what does that mean for activity participation? So can those students that are home on, say, their gold cohort and they're home on a Tuesday, can they come back for extracurricular activities, or now do you have a cohort that is practicing, I'll say football. They're practicing football, and you just do it with the purple cohort one day and the gold cohort the next day. right? And so that's a good question. We don't have an answer to that yet. And so we're waiting to see what guidance comes down from the state. And so we haven't spent a lot of time being concerned about, do we get to offer fall athletics or activities or not? Because some of that we're going to be told, like the governor said, you can have softball and baseball. So we anticipate on the 27th we'll learn more about that. And then it will be a local decision, because not every local district decided to play softball and baseball, right? Most did, but not all. And so July 27th, important day. And we're asking that question about what do you do in a hybrid model? Is it allowed to bring back students who haven't been at school that day?
So I guess my question comes maybe more from a staffing perspective. In any of these models, since we are going to have some online, and not, how does that look for our teachers when they're trying to, prepare, if they have to do both, online and in person? Is there adequate time for training and getting them up to speed on all this?
We actually have a lot of our secondary teachers right now getting their information into the Canvas learning management system. We incentivize that for the summer. We have the Google Classroom that we've utilized from last year with some of the things. We have some trainings coming up, like with elementary with the new ELA adoption. They're going to be utilizing an online tool called LearnZillion that we had talked about. They'll be doing that. So we're doing a lot of prep right now to get ready to be able to do that. And then when I talked earlier today about the competencies, so I know the state's going to be rolling out some online learning competencies the teachers are going to know, and we are going to spend some time building some professional learning for teachers around those competencies as soon as we get those. So that's in the making too. So we're trying to make it so we have a lot of things prepared and planned, knowing that we don't know what direction we're going to go. But I think our teachers really have done a great job so far of getting things ready to go, and no matter what direction we're going in. So we started that planning in May and June, and we've just really continued through a lot of the summer.
Dawn, as a tag on to Mary Beth's question, I guess it appears to me that August 1st, you're going to get a bunch of information that how many students have chosen which path. And at that point, it's going to be about the district matching up staffing resources with what students and parents have chosen at that point in time. And I know we've talked a lot about what the hybrid model looks like, but it also seems like we don't know at this point what the model we're going with. I mean, there could be some adjustments to what Mary Beth's question is for CE or professional education time or things along those lines, as our PD, I guess I'd call it. Is that a possibility?
Well, we have to monitor that, and we have to see what that looks like. All of this hinges upon how many students, how do we allocate staff, and then does it work for one kindergarten and one first grade teacher? So in collaborating with some of the other districts in the metro, I know that one of the models that one of the districts using is they're going to have online streaming in all of their classrooms so that they can be streamed live for whoever's remote. A couple other districts that I've talked to are actually allocating, they had a pretty clean mix, and they've already done this, and they have one grade level teacher or content area teacher across the board. So once we get more of this information, we'll be able to make some staffing decisions, and then that'll impact that next layer of what time and learning does everybody need to be able to do this well, so that we're not overloading certain groups of teachers. So we've sort of got a plan, but we also know all those plans hinge upon a lot of external forces and things like that. So I think our tipping point is going to be August 1st, when we can start getting that information. And I call it playing the match game of how are we going to allocate our staffing to match the remote student needs and classroom needs.
DT, from a liability standpoint, with the governor coming out and on the proclamation of stating in school, do we have to have a waiver or any form of liability sheet so that the parents understand that we are doing the best we can as a district to keep the facilities clean, doing proper guidance from the public health in terms of spacing and masks and scheduling and stuff, but yet to keep the district from being in the crosshairs of somebody blaming the district that their child was exposed, not exposed, or a teacher was exposed or not exposed from the risk of, a controlled environment that, yes, we have the flu comes into our building. Yes, chickenpox comes into our buildings. Yes, pink eye comes into our building. Strep throat comes into our building, but yet do we have to have a liability set or a waiver to kind of make sure that everybody's aware that we're in the control doing best of our ability on the proclamation of having people together based on the guidance from the governor?
Yeah, certainly it's a great question to ask. I will get some follow-up from our attorneys at Allers Law Firm, but the state did pass some legislation that limits liability for, I believe, certain businesses, but certainly for schools and other government agencies related to COVID-19. And so I can't cover every single scenario, and there are a lot of, if we can dream up a scenario, it can probably happen, right? What I'll say is we could probably never get the liability down to zero, but there have been steps taken by the legislature to limit liability of certain entities related to COVID-19, right? Can you prove that, a child or a staff member, a visitor, a volunteer was infected with COVID-19 at a particular building? And so I think given the dynamics around the pandemic, that's why the legislature took that action. But I'll get some specific information from our attorneys on that liability question.
And on the flip side, for those parents that choose the voluntary option to do remote, or at any given point we go hybrid model, are we requiring our parents a memorandum of understanding or a parental contract that they're essentially doing the attendance work? We talked about truancy a little bit, that's in the governor's proclamation, but just that they're now ceding the responsibility that their child will be online for attendance sake, will be doing the jobs that our teachers do every day in terms of that accountability of getting that. Turning on the computer is one thing, but if they're on the other side of the screen, it's going to be hard to keep track that they're doing their work, so that we don't get to the end of the year and say, man, Johnny or Susie or whoever was online all year and they're now behind their peers because we couldn't rein that in because they were at their home or not on our site.
Sure. Yep.
Part of the guidance and legislations that come down, it said that we are required to take attendance and give grades. So we know that, I think in every one of the building plans, it actually explicitly states that. So we will, if students make those choices, then and they're choosing not to be online, or they can't for some reason, then a lot of those conversations have to happen between the teacher, the student, and the parent to have a discussion on how, as a team, we can figure out how to make that work better.
And to piggyback on that, in person we have interventions, we have warrior time, we have differentiation strategies if the lesson is not learned, or if they're absent, or whatever the scenario is, we control that. Online, we lose some of that control and scheduling purposes to really hone in on that type of work, because we're not likely going to go to their house and sit down with them is likely the answer here. But I guess talk about how that's going to work from a making up grades standpoint, or rework, right, or relearning, whatever terminology you want to use here.
I think that goes back to that student ownership and the partnership with the parent, the student, and the teacher, of how they can make that most successful for the student. And there's as many scenarios as we can always think of, but I think that's really individual. And once we start to move through this, I think our teachers have been really, really good about communicating with parents and assisting students to know and understand what they need to do. And so I think that turns into that personal kind of conversation. And if that doesn't work, then it's almost just like a student would be here. If they're truant for a certain amount of time and they're not in attendance, then we would have to treat that the exact same way.
So one thing I'll point out is, and again, we've based this off of some recommendations from ISB, their attorney, Siobhan Schneider. and then run this form through our attorneys at Allers. And so towards the end of the form for required remote learning, it says, by digitally signing my name below, I understand that the district will do its best to accommodate my child's learning needs, but that some learning opportunities must be modified in a remote environment. The provision of special education and accommodations for students who have individualized education programs, IEPs, or Section 504 plans will be determined by each respective IEP or Section 504 team. I understand that in order for my child to continue to participate in mandatory learning, his or her remote attendance will be taken, assessments administered, and grades will be counted toward my child's cumulative grade point or grade average. I understand that any devices, technology, or materials given to my child to facilitate remote learning are the property of the district and must be returned in good condition at the end of the remote learning period. And so that's right at the bottom of the form, and then the parents will sign digitally. And we're going to follow up and just to confirm that that's what they're requesting. So anybody it's a Google form, we're just going to make sure that it wasn't, it's going to be a publicly available form, that Lauren McGee, didn't submit that instead of her parents. So we will trust but verify each of these forms that are submitted.
This question may be best served for Mr. Geyer as well, but I'll ask you and Kate, do we have all the equipment and the specialty equipment, i.e. hotspots, things of that nature, at our disposal for those that would potentially need it? I know we went through this exercise in the spring for those that especially needed it for the voluntary eye, but do we have that lined up in the event that we either have to go all full remote or, especially if we have large sums of folks that are not, especially at the elementary where they don't have one-to-one in their possession? We are
K-12 devices for sure. And Tim's in the auditorium, but he's going to give me a thumbs up if, I think we're going to have devices for our preschool students as well. Am I right in that? Yes, thumbs up. And so we're going to have those resources. I think those are going to be tablets or iPads. Is that right? Thumbs up on, yep, he's nodding, double thumbs up on that. And so thank you, Mr. Geyer. Hotspots, we do have limited availability of hotspots. But one thing we've done as a district is work closely with the city to get coverage for a wireless network in certain parts of our community where we saw that there were some gaps in coverage. And so a student could potentially be, say, in their apartment or in their home and have access to the school network. And so we're trying to do that, and then that takes some pressure off of our hotspot resources. The other things we're doing is we've got an order in for some cameras so that we can help to facilitate streaming from classrooms, microphones as well, so cameras and microphones. And so we're deploying some different technology resources, not to mention, to mention what Dawn said earlier about the Canvas learning management system that we're deploying as well. And then also at the PK, K, and first grade level, Seesaw will be utilizing that learning resource as well. Other questions about the Return to Learn plan?
I just wanted to thank you and the rest of your team. It's been a big lift to get to here, and we're not working in a perfect environment. I don't think anybody knows what the perfect environment is, and part of my concern for parents sending their children back is that they know and understand. I don't think that perfect environment exists, and that's just something that everybody has to know and understand. But flexibility of your team and this board and everybody as we deal with the next blows is important. The only last piece that I toss out to you is the communication component. I think it's been really good with parents that willing to step up and involve themselves. I think that's going to be a real key as we go forward with parents as students get back in buildings. That line so they understand what's going on with their child. I can see that really ramping up. I think there's going to be a big load on the principals as that time starts to approach here. So we'll see how it goes. We're all hoping for the best, but I think the plan is based in guidance. As well as I can interpret the guidance that I've read and reviewed, and I think we've lived by that standard. So
I do have one or two final comments. First, I would echo your sentiments about the building principals. I would encourage everybody to show kindness and grace to our building level staff, secretaries, principals. They're going to get a lot of information that flows towards them, a lot of requests for information. We're going to set a goal of trying to respond to emails within 24 hours. That may not get a full answer, but at least say, I've received your email, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So we're going to try to set that expectation for myself and for other district staff members. Note that weekend hours, we're talking about during the week, right? So we'll grant some grace over the weekends so that kind of 48 hours over the weekend may not apply to that 24 hours. And the other thing I would say is, just from my personal standpoint, I love everybody that I serve. Even some, not even some, I love everybody I serve. And that's the way I'm approaching this. And so it's so important, I think, for us to come together. We're the United States of America. And so I truly think that we can do this together. So I think I have some other stuff to say, but I think I'm going to leave it for there, and then we'll go through the rest. And I reserve the right to maybe come back and say one or two more things. But show grace, show kindness, be patient as we go through this, and just know that there are a ton of people in this district that love the people we serve, especially our students and our staff.
And I would just like to maybe echo even and build on what David said too, as far as I want to thank the entire administrative staff and team and DT, and there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes, and so what some people maybe see in the public in our discussion, there's still a lot more that's been done, like I said, behind the scenes, and it's not an easy decision before us tonight. I'm not sure, there's no real right answers necessarily, because we have to go with what we know at this point. And I know the board has been diligent, so has DT and the staff, as far as reading all the guidance and getting the best information we can at this particular point. And so we're going to make our decision based off of that and go forward knowing that pieces of this plan definitely could change between now and our next meeting and now and August 24th. But there are a lot of great people in this district that have done a lot of work to get us to this point, and I truly appreciate all of that work that's been done. Are there any other questions from board members? Any final comments? Anybody else want to? So before us tonight, we have the plan, we have the changes, and it's probably at that point, unless there are other comments or questions, that we need to make a decision or call for a vote.
President Wright, are we approving two parts of this? One, the plan in general, and B, the actual model for which we're using, or are we just doing the latter?
So the recommendation tonight is to approve the plan, and then the model that we would be implementing is the in-person with the medically request for medical required remote learning or voluntary required remote learning.
Are those independent or codependent motions, is my question to you.
I think we could do one, or we can do two. So I would defer that to the board and how they want to handle that.
I'm thinking, sorry, I'm thinking as I'm speaking. To me, I feel like it'd be cleaner with one motion, but I may be, unless others are, feel differently.
I think one's okay. I guess one thing I want to say is that because we know everything's so fluid and because we know there's so much coming back or coming to us from the government as the first, and like so much stuff is still to come, I think one of the things is that we vote now, but I'm assuming that this will be another line item, another big line item on our August 10th board meeting, and that some of this could be looked at again at that point to make sure that what we chose tonight needs to be forward to move forward at that time based on the guidance that we get the first of the month. Yeah, I mean, if there's plan revisions or, based on what comes down the first of the month, that maybe on August 10th we say we have to be hybrid or something to change. I think, making the plan as it is now based on what we know, but knowing that the first of the month it may change and we may have to revisit this on our August 10th board meeting. And that's why, as it stated before, being as a parent, making sure that you have a plan for unfortunately being home full-time. I mean, we hope that we can be back in school and things can move forward, but knowing that between now and August 24th, things can change and it could be completely different than what we decide tonight.
And I guess my rationale for splitting the two, to be honest, one is we will continue to probably modify this plan. It will come from the board as we can then stand alone and separate the items between here's what our execution is, our model we choose,
Yeah.
versus, hey, here's my return to learn plan. And I've edited section 2.2 because of new guidance. Well, I come back in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks. If I've got them split apart saying we've already approved the plan, now we're just doing the modification, then I don't have to come back and unwind, well, I had the plan and my structure, I have to unwind and reapprove later because I've commingled those as two dependent items. That's kind of where I'm going for as we continue to look through this, because I would expect that, obviously there's no motion here, but we have 3 options in play. Potentially, we may as a board have to come back and choose a second execution model based on data or a different path, where we would have that to be independent as a decision as well without having to restrike the whole plan.
But couldn't we accept the plan and then come back and do updates or subsequent sections? Or you're saying because we can separate them out, it would make it easier?
I think it's cleaner if they're separated, me personally, because now I've got the return to learn plan that has all my options in it that I will modify. I can guarantee you from now until sometime in the future, to make a nice, even guarantee, we will make modifications to this plan. That should come in front of the board as just like a policy would and say, hey, we've modified this in green. I do not believe that every meeting or every other meeting or sometime between now, we may have to switch our execution model for which we can vote as a board to do such an event, but that will be fewer and far between than the number of revisions we will have in this plan. And I just think if we keep it separate, you have that clarity of saying, hey, we're doing the plan and we've modified it or we've not modified it. That's the big umbrella. Now in there, we've chosen our execution path as a piece within it, but an independent piece at that.
Are you suggesting a motion approving the execution model within the plan as one motion, and then I guess that might be your second motion? Your first motion would be to approve the plan? Is that your?
That was my thought. I thought maybe the cleaner way as a board, because then we can keep them separate.
I think either way you do it, you'll be fine, but I understand your logic, and so I don't, I don't think that's a problem. So I think what the board should do is first, I think the order is important. I think you should approve, consider the plan approval first, and then we're selecting if you're going to follow the recommendation from the executive cabinet and the principals to implement the fully in-person with the required remote options.
Well, I could take this in my own hands and I'll just make the motion here, I guess. It's kind of the right. I just feel it's safer for us from a board in decision-making to separate this out and understand. I think we might be in consensus here, but I have not spoke with each individual board member to determine their likelihood for any of these models. But I think we are in agreement that we need a plan. We need this plan to be written out and modified in compliance with guidance and information we've received. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve the return to learn plan as presented tonight to the board with the current modifications and understanding that we will potentially have more modifications in the future.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the return to learn plan as modified and presented to the board tonight. Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote. Jake?
Director Albrecht.
Aye.
Director Fletcher.
Aye.
Director Kelly.
Aye.
Director Roush.
Aye.
And President Wright.
Aye. So the return to learn plan has been approved.
Now I would like to make a motion to recommend the return as normal on-site with modification with the caveat of medical or religious waivers for their online learning. So option 1 is in my own words. Medical or volunteer. Jake, can you fix that for me? Make that motion to the board.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is everybody clear on the motion? Okay. And all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Justin. No, we're just going to do regular vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That has been approved. Thank you all, again, for time and efforts put into this Return to Learn plan. Do you want to say anything?
Future agenda items?
Yes. Okay, I thought you wanted to.
I got off the agenda a little bit at the retreat, and you were helping me out, so I wanted to make sure I could help
Okay.
you.
Any future agenda items that the board would like to include in that area?
I do need to advise the board, we'll be bringing some information back to the full board.
Oh, hold on, you got to have everybody online can hear you.
Just want to bring it to the board's attention that the Capital Projects Committee met this week, and we've been discussing with our engineer, Bishop Engineering, about moving forward with the paving project down at the middle school baseball, softball diamonds. That was something that was in the bond issue that we had moving forward, and it was a tentative in the 17 issue, but then it was a guaranteed project dimension in that recent bond issue. And now with the residual funds we have remaining from the projects that we just completed, we've got sufficient funds to advance that now. It's a good bidding environment, and so the capital projects are going to be bringing that back as a recommendation.
And clarity on that one, Kate, that you said is just the parking spots and kind of the main little part down into, not the paving project from the road from Cherry to 17th?
That's a good question. No, we're not doing that last leg that would connect the actual Eastview 17th Street to the Cherry Street. It would just be an extension with a dead end with parking lots at the middle school and baseball diamond. I'll be providing plans here that what the subcommittee looked at this week.
Return to Learn.
So obviously, when we get to the 10th DT, we'd like to see the numbers of students, or not names per se, but numbers of folks that have opted for the voluntary or medical.
Yep, we'll provide that. And actually, we'll probably send that out prior to the meeting, of course, to board members, just so you know, have that well before the 10th of August.
And another topic is transportation around the city. It looks like there's still 2 projects that have a lot of orange cones up that dictate our bus routes, i.e. Main Street and east of town off of over by
80th.
Maribess,
Yeah,
neck of
80th.
the woods. Can we get updates, make sure hopefully we'll have no obstructions by the time we get to the 24th on those 2 road projects?
He
Yeah, we'll
asked
get-
about
we'll get an update
the
on that.
transportation and the community projects.
And then potentially, DD, could we maybe get Mr. Nelson back for a cameo from the city, just to kind of hear what's been going on, not only from construction, but just in general from the COVID, the outlook when he was in there, we were pre-COVID,
But we had to reschedule, if you, by way of reminder, the West Des Moines presentation, so I think maybe we could pair some of that together. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other items, future agenda items from anybody? All right, then.
Update on enrollment too, as
Yeah.
we get closer. By the 10th will be, I know we'll have some late arrivers that show up on the 24th, just to enroll for school, but kind of an updated number set of folks that have registered and things of that nature.
Any others? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you, board members. Thanks, administrative team, and everybody that came out tonight. Appreciate it. And everybody who watched online. Thank you. And of course, our black shirts, auditorium crew.